Welcome to all of you in class, whether you are sitting in front of me or wherever you are watching. I pray you have downloaded Romans 30 notes, and I pray that you have your Bibles, because we will be looking at Scripture tonight. Actually, if you want to know where we're going to be tonight, we're going to be in Genesis chapter 38. This is a very interesting study, and I hope some of you are still working on that assignment, still giving some thought to it, because I think you're going to, as we go on, and I know some of you are have gone on and are listening to the very, 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 very detailed coverage of the migration of the tribes that Pastor Dr. Scott is doing. And very detailed. There's no way. I've done that, some of that, but there's no way I could do that in here. So if you're interested, it's getting very detailed. And if you're a student of biblical history, you're probably loving it. If not, you're probably going out, taking a walk, coming back, and saying, okay, I got that much. But I hope you are taking advantage of that. So tonight, we are going to look at the tribe of Judah. By the way, if you're watching, please let me know you're watching. I know you're watching because we know you're watching. We know kind of who you are. We know how many of you are watching, and I know how many of you are watching versus how many phone calls and messages I'm getting. So if you are watching at home, wherever you are, please call and let me know that you are receiving something from the classes. And it's very easy. All you have to do is call 330-453-2519 and let me know that you are watching. So, the tribe of Judah. Now, if you remember, up to this point, we've looked at the tribes of Reuben, Levi, and Simeon. So, Reuben should have received the birthright blessings because of primogeniture, the privilege of the firstborn. But Reuben sinned against his father. Then, of course, if you're going down through the law of primogeniture, it would have then gone to Simeon. But because he and Levi slaughtered the men of Hamor and his son Shechem and ravaged the city, they too were passed over. So you had Simeon and Levi now passed over. So the birthright, and this is what is interesting, because here you're going to be seeing a bifurcation of the birthright. You're going to see it go in two different directions. So the birthright will now be divided between Judah and the two half-Egyptian sons of Joseph, Ephraim and Manasseh. So I want us to go, first of all, to Genesis 48, and we'll come back to 38. So go to Genesis 48. Verse 5. And Jacob Israel, remember, Jacob had his name changed to Israel. That's why it's the children of Israel. And so what I want us to see, and for a while I'll be saying Jacob Israel, so you'll know who I'm talking about. And so he is now speaking to Joseph, his son Joseph, and he said, verse 5, and now your two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, who were born to you in the land of Egypt before I came to you in Egypt, are mine. So basically, Jacob Israel is telling Joseph, your two sons, I'm taking them as my own. I'm in essence adopting them as my own.
We're in 48.
We are in 48.5 right now.
Okay.
We're going to go back to 38, but we're in 48.5 right now.
Okay.
So, he said, they're mine. As Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. In other words, what you are seeing here happen is Levi has another task that will be given to the tribe of Levi. Reuben and Simeon were bypassed. And so, in essence, he said, they are going to be mine as if they were Reuben and Simeon. They're basically going to step in to the position of Reuben and Simeon as regards the birthright. They shall be mine. Okay. So Israel took these sons as his own. And as we looked at in the closing notes of last week, none of the sons of Jacob, Israel, were perfect. None. They would not be exactly the kind of people that you would want to brag about. Now I want us to go to Genesis 49. You're saying, I thought we were going to 38. We are. But we have to go to some other places first. In Genesis 49, I want us to pick up at verse 8. Because this chapter is giving Jacob Israel's last words to his sons. And so if we pick up at verse 8, Judah, you are he whom your brothers shall praise. I'm going to stop right here. What does Judah mean? Praise. Judah means praise. Your hand shall be on the neck of your enemies. And it was customary that day when you defeated somebody, symbolically you put your foot on their neck and held them down, or your hand. Down, stay down. Your father's children shall bow down before you. Judah is a lion's whelp. From the prey, my son, you have gone up. He bows down, he lies down as a lion. And as a lion, who shall rouse him? The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver from between his feet, until Shiloh comes. Who's Shiloh?
Jesus.
Jesus. And to him shall be the obedience of the people, and his donkey's colt to the choice, binding his donkey to the vine, and his donkey's colt to the choice vine. And this is a very interesting passage of scripture. Pay very close attention to it. He washed his garments in wine and his clothes in the blood of grapes. His eyes are darker than wine, and his teeth whiter than milk. So Judah, the name Judah means praise. And a lion is part of the emblem for the tribe of Judah. And I will tell you that that's going to become very, very significant as we begin to trace the migration of the tribe of Judah. Part of the birthright was the right to rule. So Judah is also given lawgiver status. So the scepter of rulership, he's going to be a lawgiver. Now we can go to Genesis chapter 38. So if you would turn in your Bible to Genesis chapter 38. Let's begin at verse 1. It came to pass at that time that Judah departed from his brothers and visited a certain Adullamite whose name was Hira. And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua. And he married her and went into her. So she conceived and bore a son, and he called his name She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. And she conceived yet again and bore a son, and called his name Shelah. He was at Kezib when she bore him. Then Judah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked, in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord killed him. So the wicked, and if you've been around class any length of time at all, you know that this word is raw. Wicked is raw, and I've given you the Strong's number. And this word carries the idea of bad in a moral, first of all, moral, and also ethical sense. So was pretty bad. And this word meant evil in an absolute sense. So it wasn't that, he was a little ornery, or he was, he just liked to, be a little bad.
Is it a what sense? What is it?
Absolute sense. Yes.
I didn't get number 1.
Okay, Reuben should have received the birthright blessings because of primogeniture, the privilege of the firstborn. So now it has gone to Judah. So this meant, he was, you hear the expression bad to the bone?
Yeah.
Well, this was So let's pick up now. Any questions on 4? So note 5. Now we're going to pick up in Genesis 38:8. And Judah said to Onan, "Go into your brother's wife and marry her, and raise up an heir to your brother," because that is the levirate law. If you ever hear that in Judaism, that if a brother dies without an heir, it is the duty of the next brother to raise up an heir for his brother. And if you ever, there are some movies that are worth watching. And if you've never seen this movie, you need to see it. I can't tell you how many times I've watched it, and that is the movie Loving Leah. And this explains that whole process, and it's really beautiful how it turns out. But and Judah said to Onan, "Go into your brother's wife and marry her, and raise up an heir to your brother." But Onan, like I said, just because they're children of Israel didn't mean they were perfect. But Onan knew that the heir would not be his. And it came to pass, when he went into his brother's wife, that he admitted on the ground, lest he should give an heir to his brother. Okay? And the thing which he did displeased the Lord, therefore he killed him also. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, "Remain a widow in your father's house till my son Shelah is grown." For he said, lest he also die like his brothers. And we're going to stop here for a minute. Judah knew why his 2 sons had been killed by God. It was not, I will know why God would kill my sons. They're such ideal individuals. No, they weren't. Do you think that it was hidden from Judah the nature and character of his sons? Absolutely not. But he said, lest he also die like his brothers. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. So she's had to go back home. So let's skip ahead now to 12. Now so she does what he asks her. She's waiting for what? She's waiting for Shelah to be of marrying age so that she will have a husband to raise an heir. Okay? Now in the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died, and Judah was comforted and went up to his sheep shears at Timnah, he and his friend Hira the Adullamite. And it was told Tamar, saying, look, now why? Because she has stayed all this time in her father's house, waiting for his son Shelah to be given to her. And so she is told that, oh, your father-in-law is going up to Timnah to shear his sheep. So she said, if there's going to be an heir in this tribe, by the way, he has no more sons. He has no more sons. So she knows that. So she took off her widow's garments, covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place which was on the way to Timnah. And I've been in that area. Some of you have been there. If you were on any of the Israel trips where we took to the south, heading toward Elah, we were at Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given to him as a wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a harlot because she had covered her face. Well, let's see how he responds. Then he turned to her by the way and said, please let me come in to you. Because why? His wife has died, right? For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. So she said, what will you give me that you may come into me? And he said, I will send a young goat from the flock. So she said, will you give me a pledge till you send it? Then he said, what pledge shall I give you? So she said, your signet and cord and your staff that is in your hand. These are going to be very significant. This isn't just something of value that she's going to keep until he comes and tries to get them out of hock. They're very significant, identifiable objects. Then he gave them to her and went into her, and she conceived by him. Now, the signet cord, the signet ring, the cord, which was a bracelet, and staff, identified the head of the family. Those were very identifiable. You know, the ring was passed down from father to the firstborn and on down, and now it would have gone from father to Judah. From Jacob to Judah, now to his son. Now the staff passed from father to son and was a symbol of power. So I want you to see something. Tamar now has what? She has the symbol of power in this family. So the three sons of Judah are dead. Yet the prophetic declaration of Jacob that a descendant of Judah would be a ruler and lawgiver would come to pass. It's going to come to pass. By the way, when God had to kill the first two sons of Judah, he didn't fall off the throne saying, oh, what's going to happen now? And Judah didn't follow through on what he needed to do. God didn't fall off the throne. What am I going to do now? All my plans. So now let's look at verse 19 of the 38th chapter. So she arose and went away and laid aside her veil and put on the garments of her widowhood. And Judah sent the young goat by the hand of his friend the Adullamite to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he did not find her. And then he asked the men of that place, saying, where is the harlot who was openly by the roadside? And they said, there was no harlot in this place. So he returned to Judah and said, I cannot find her. And also the men of the place said, there was no harlot in this place. Then Judah said, let her take them for herself. Now I want you to see this. This is a very important verse. Then Judah said, let her take them for herself, lest we be ashamed. You should have been ashamed before this. Oh, if I have to go, in other words, if I have to go into that district looking for my stuff, I'll be shamed. I sent this young goat, and you have not found her. And I don't want to pursue this anymore, lest I be ashamed. And it came to pass, about 3 months after, that Judah was told, saying, Tamar, your daughter-in-law, has played the harlot. Kind of interesting how the scripture does a play on words. She had played a harlot, but she wasn't playing a harlot. Furthermore, she is with child by harlotry. Talk about shame. So Judah said, bring her out and let her be burned. The Bible is very interesting. And when she was brought out, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, by the man to whom these belong, I am with child. And what do you think she had? The ring, the cord, and the staff. And by the way, the staff was inscribed with the ancestors. So let me tell you what had been on that staff. Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. And Yehuda. There was no getting around by whom she was with child. She said, please determine whose these are, the signet and cord and staff. So Judah acknowledged them and said, she has been more righteous. She has been more kadosh than I. Because I did not give her to Shelah, my son. And he never knew her again. But she continues to bear the heir for the tribe of Judah. So the promise is going to be fulfilled, because now it came to pass at the time for giving birth, and behold, twins were in her womb. Twins, I would say that twins seem to run in that family.
Yeah.
Well, it's okay. You'll get it eventually. Remember, twins run in this family. And so it was when she was giving birth that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took a scarlet thread and bound it on his hand, saying, this one came out first. So you have one twin who basically sticks his hand out. He's coming out. And when the hand was out, the midwife tied a red cord around his hand. And actually it was cord, and then there's significance to cord rather than thread. Okay, even though it's New King James says thread, it actually was a cord. That will become significant even as we move on in the Word of God. And bound it on his hand, saying, this one came out first. Then it happened, as he drew back his hand, that his brother came out unexpectedly. And that kind of, there was, and these twins, like I said, the twins running in the family, the twins kind of battled. There's a history there, too, of twins battling each other even in the womb.
Yeah.
Then it happened as he drew back his hand that his brother came out unexpectedly, and she said, how did you break through? This breach be upon you. So guess what he was named? Breach. Therefore his name was called Perez. Breached. Afterward his brother came out who had the scarlet, and I would say cord on his hand, and his name was called Zara. I just want to make one note to you. Sometimes you're going to see Phares, sometimes you're going to see Perez, sometimes you're going to see Phares, sometimes you're going to see Zara, Z-A-R-A, sometimes you're going to see Zara, Z-E-R-A-H. It's the same person. It will change, and it's because it's just because of what happens in language. But whenever you read it, it's the same family, it's the same person. So the promise would be fulfilled in the lines of Phares, and that's why you'll see in Zara. So I want us now to go to 1 Chronicles, so we've got to move along a little bit. 1 Chronicles, chapter 2. Verses 1 through 6. These were the sons of Israel: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Joseph, Benjamin, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. Okay. And remember, Jacob, Israel. So we're talking, if you know who, when we see Israel, the sons of Israel, it's the sons of Jacob. The sons of Judah were Onan, and Shelah. These three were born to him by the daughter of Shua the Canaanitess. The firstborn of Judah, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, so he killed him. We've already read about that. And Tamar, his daughter-in-law, bore him Perez and Zara. All the sons of Judah were 5. Okay? So we're seeing this. Now the sons of Perez were Hezron and Hamul. The sons of Zara were Zimri, Ethan, Heman, Calcol, and Dara. 5 of them in all. Now please hear what I'm going to say to you right now. I want you to remember some of these. Now, I'm not asking you to memorize them, but I want you to kind of remember. You're going to want to remember Perez. The sons of Perez were Hezron and Hamul for a reason. Because somebody very, very important is going to come and descend from Perez.
Can you say what their sons was again?
They're in verse 5. The sons of Perez were Hezron and Hamul in verse 5 of 1 Chronicles 2. And how many know who that very special person was who descended from Perez? How many have ever read Matthew 1 or Luke 1? If you're at home, I've had one hand of you. Now I know you all. You all have read. At some point, you've read Luke and Matthew, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. The sons of Zara were Zimri, Ethan, Heman, Calcol, and Dara. And I will tell you very, very, very important that you at least remember Calcol and Dara. And you should have them on your chart, if you have. Okay. So that becomes very important. So, and now I want us to go to 1 Kings, chapter 4. Now it's very lengthy. So King Solomon was king over all Israel. And these were his officials: Azariah, the son of Zadok, the priest; Elihoreph and Ahijah, the sons of Shisha; scribes; Jehoshaphat, the son of Ahilud, the recorder; Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, over the army; Zadok and Abiathar, the priests; Azariah, the son of Nathan, over the officers; Zabud, the son of Nathan, a priest and the king's friend; Abishar, over the household; and Adoniram, the son of Abda, over the labor force. And Solomon had 12 governors over all Israel, who provided food for the king and his household. Each one made provision for 1 month of the year. There's some I know sometimes you think, oh, these names, and is it important? You know what's very important here? Solomon had 12 governors over all Israel. And while he was king, there were these 12 governors made provision for 1 month of the year for the king and his household. There's something being set up there, making provision. These are the names. Now, you thought this just came out of a movie that you saw in the 50s, right? These are their names: Ben-Hur in the mountains of Ephraim, Ben-Decker in Makaz, Sha'albim, Beth-Shemesh, and Elon, Beth-Hanan. And at first time, I am going to just say there are some very important ones here. But I want us to just right now skip down to 20 and 21. Okay? Judah and Israel were as numerous as the sand by the sea in multitude, eating and drinking and rejoicing. So Solomon reigned over all kingdoms from the river to the land of the Philistines as far as the border of Egypt. They brought tribute and served Solomon all the days of his life. Now, in 1 Chronicles 2, there is a bifurcation of the lineage of Judah. And that's why we went through looking at Pharez, and then we looked at the sons of Zara. And so you had a bifurcation of the lineage of Judah into the Zara line and the Pharez line. And I said, notice sometimes you'll see it differently. They're the same individuals. Now the Zara line remember, Zara came out first, had the gold cord, or the red cord of royalty and firstborn. And then the hand drew back. And so now you got 2 boys born, and there is going to be dissension, and there's going over who is legitimately the firstborn. Now the Zara line were shepherds, and historical records say they were despised by the Egyptians. And the reason being is because not only were they shepherds, but they were wealthy shepherds. There are some things, can I just say that, some things never change. And there are still people out there today who say, well, these people have all the money. And they're just skinning everybody else because they got all the money. No, they were given a promise and a blessing, and that promise and blessing continues. The gifts, the blessings, and the calling of God are without God changing his mind. And it doesn't matter who likes it or who doesn't like it. God's God. So they despised them. And because in essence, because they obviously were the family of Joseph. And and remember, Joseph was second only to Pharaoh in power and authority. So actually, there was a title to them. And if you will go and look in Egyptian history, they were called Hyksos. And Hyksos were shepherd kings. Shepherd kings. So the division of the Pharezites and Zarahites occurred at the death of Joseph. So when Joseph died, and Joseph made his family promise him that what? They would not leave him in Egypt. And so they would eventually put him in a sarcophagus, what is called an ossuary, when you get into Israel. Now, this is the important thing because he said, because God promised, right? God made this promise to Abraham. 400 years, your descendants will be slaves, but then they'll come out. So Joseph made his brother's promise, when I die, don't leave me in Egypt. I want you to carry me back to my home. Do you realize he had never been back home since he had been sold into slavery? So think about this, the promises of God. As he said, God made this promise to Abraham that we would come out. So we're going to come out. So here are the children of Israel leaving Egypt. And with every step they took, somebody was carrying that ossuary. And the bones were rattling. And the bones were rattling. You know, sometimes you think there are bones rattling, but understand, every rattle said God was faithful to his promise. We're not in captivity anymore. We're coming out. We're coming out. With every step they took, carrying those bones of Joseph, that was a reminder that God is faithful. God is faithful. So, at the death of Joseph is when the bifurcation of Pharez and Zarahites occurred. The end of the biblical record of the Zarahite line occurs in the book of Exodus. How many? That's early. So by the time the children of Israel leaving the Exodus, the Zara line has already, there's no record in the Bible. Well, there's a record, but it's, so they leave Egypt. Zara left Egypt. The Zarahites left Egypt before the Exodus led by Moses. Now I want to ask this question. Even though they left Egypt before the Exodus led by Moses, is there a way of tracing the Zara line of Judah?
Yes.
Absolutely. And we're going to do it. Now you may want to look at your tribe charts. Okay, and if you don't have one,
I got an extra one.
we have some up here, but everyone should have them now, right? Let's see. Okay, they should have you. There's nothing much I can do about people at home unless you want to call me and I'll mail you one. Okay, so if you get your chart, now we're doing, see we're on Judah. So if you'll look at your chart, we have Judah, and then you see the bifurcation into Zara line and Pharez line. So remember when we were reading in 1 Chronicles, and I said, just kind of remember, familiarize yourself with these names. These will become very, very important as we trace the migration of the tribe of Judah. So the son of Calcol, and you'll see Zara, and these are the descendants of Zara: Zimri, Ethan, Heman, Calcol, and Dara. So Gathalus returns to Egypt. Okay, he has left with all of his family, and returns to Egypt, and then goes to Spain. He goes to Spain with his wife Skoda. And remember this, just remember his wife's name was Skota. That's going to become somewhat interesting as we move along. And in the course of time, they forgot their native language. And I would simply remind you, as we were studying, remember we studied the Babylonian captivity, the Jews were carried away, the Yehudites were carried away in captivity to Babylon. They were in Babylon 70 years. When they came back and they found the scrolls of the scriptures, one of the things that was the problem was they needed to have what? They needed to have translators because they'd forgotten their language. And you've probably heard it. If you don't use a language, you lose it. I'll be honest with you. I took French and I took German, but because I don't use those, very little. They're little pieces, but that's it. Because I haven't spoken French since I was in junior high. I took French in 7th and 8th grade, and believe me, I'm old. So it's been a long, long time, you know. And as far as German, I haven't taken German since I was a freshman and sophomore at Bowling Green, and that's been decades ago. So what happened? We know that within 70 years, when they came back to Jerusalem, they had to have an interpreter to interpret the language of the scriptures. So you can imagine, you have Gathalus goes with Scoda to Spain, and then in the course of time they forgot their native language, which would have been Hebrew, and they also lost their Hebrew faith. So as these people moved and migrated, they only had faint memories of their history, but there are certain things. I'm in note 8.
Yes.
Okay.
The native language and their right
Faith. Faith.
Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry, faith. I come from southeastern Ohio, so I talk funny. They told me that when I went to Bowling Green in the northwest part of Ohio. And I wasn't there a day till they told me I talked funny. And then I spent a year in Virginia, so I really talked funny. So as these people moved and migrated, they had only faint memories of their history, but there were some things that were very important to them that got passed down. So we have only faint traces of their names. Sometimes we're going to see names given to locations such as Zaragoza in Spain. So here's what we're noticing as you begin to trace the tribes through history. These people disappear in one place. So what happened? Well, Gathalus and Scoda disappear from Egypt. They go to Spain, but guess what? Something shows up that is related to what? Their history. Their ancestor, Zara. And so they name a place Zaragoza. And so they disappear in one place and seem to reappear somewhere else. Now, in Maccabees 1:12, and I'm going to make a note of this. It's in the Apocrypha. And just so you will know, the Apocrypha was in the Bible, the Geneva Bible that the Pilgrims would have brought. It was still in there, that the Pilgrims brought to the United States when they came in 1620. So it's good history. It is not accepted as canon of Scripture in the same level as our canon today, but we still know that it is indeed accurate history. Yes?
Isn't the Maccabees in the Catholic Bible?
Yes, because the Apocrypha is in the Catholic Bible. It's considered a part of the canon of Scripture there. And I have a copy of the Apocrypha just because it's excellent history. And by the way, it's in Greek. So it's a little bit fun reading. But you can get it in English too. But in Maccabees 1:12, some Greeks are writing a letter. And in it they state, now notice what I just said to you. Who are the people? Greeks. And they're writing a letter and they say, and I quote from Maccabees 1:12, "We are the stock of Abraham." Now, this is what I am not saying. You're going to hear me say this in the classes we do here. I am not saying all Greeks are of the stock of Abraham. How many heard what I just said?
Yes.
I am saying that there were some people who had migrated, who were Greeks, that were saying, we are the stock of Abraham. Now, because of the promise to Judah in Genesis 49, 8 through 10, because, and I guess we need to go and remind ourselves of that in Genesis 49. I know what it is. Scepter is not pointed apart. Genesis 49, 8 and 10. Judah, let's just put it this way, I know what he's talking about. It's actually, let's look at 10. The scepter shall not depart from Judah. Scepter, meaning what? Kingship, rulership. Shall not depart, nor a lawgiver from between his feet. In other words, lawgiver coming, being born, descending from Judah, the tribe of Judah, until Shiloh comes. And Shiloh coming is speaking of a time yet to come. It's speaking of the second coming. So I have a question for you. How can that be? I just want you to just consider it. I know how it can be. But just think. So, is this the Word of God? Yes. Therefore, it's true, right? Therefore, if God said it, it's true. Now, I'm just going to throw this in, so just to make you think. The last king of the kingdom of Judah, okay, prior to the Babylonian captivity, was King Zedekiah, right? And Zedekiah had sons. Now they would be the end of that line. And what happened to Zedekiah was this. In front of Zedekiah, the Babylonians killed every one of his sons in front of him. So the last thing he ever saw in his life was the slaughter of his sons, and then they put out his eyes. So he never saw anything after that. So the question becomes, how can the scripture be true that the scepter shall not depart from Judah until Shiloh comes? Okay, just saying, there is a coming. But why? Because Judah, the two lines have to be reunited. Okay? Because the Pharez line through sons is gone, right? All the sons are gone. All the male descendants of the Pharez line are gone. They're dead. So in studying the movement and disbursement of the tribes, we have to distinguish between migration from the captivity of the northern tribes, which was the kingdom of Israel, who were forced to migrate. They were forced to migrate. Assyria forced them. And then continued migrating, and they did. They continued to migrate. And I will tell you, they continued to migrate everywhere. And the migration from the Babylonian captivity, because the reality is there was a migration from the Babylonian captivity. Not all of the Yehudahites from the kingdom of Judah returned to Jerusalem. They too migrated. God said, in note 11, to Abraham, that he would be the father of many nations. And by the way, the word for nations is goyim.
Could you give me the answers for 10 again? I didn't get them.
Yes. 10 was the kingdom of Israel, and the Babylonian captivity. Babylonian. And 11 note was nations. He said he'd be a father of many nations. And of course that is the Hebrew word goyim. Goyim. So to see the details of God making things come to pass is an exciting adventure, because here we are right now at note 8, and here's the deal. The Pharez or Perez line through males is gone. There is no male descendant. And there's no one else in that area of any descendancy to assume the throne. But there has to be a descendant of Judah with kingship somewhere all the time until Shiloh comes. And then who's going to assume the throne? Jesus. Who just happens to have a certain name that talks about the tribe of Judah. So, we're now going to deal with the adventures that has to do with the twin sons of Judah, Zara and Pharez. So there were great implication in Jacob's actions in passing out the blessing of the birthright prior to his death. So understand something. He's doing this prior to his death. It just doesn't happen after his death. He does it prior. Jacob gives Joseph, through adopting his two sons, Ephraim, 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 and Manasseh, Manasseh, all the good blessings. They get all the good blessings. And actually, these two sons of Joseph receive almost the entire birthright. However, Jacob, Israel, keeps back the right to be king. Right to be king. See, God knew from the beginning what was going to happen in the end. And he also kept back the right to make governing laws. And there was going to be a descendant of the tribe of Judah who would fulfill the law. So this blessing then is given to Judah, king and right to make governing laws. So this means that while the descendants of Joseph will be the rich nobility of the children of Israel, unless you think you know about, oh wow, the sons of Joseph, because the sons of Joseph are not Jews. How many heard what I just said? They are not Jews. The sons of Joseph are not Jews. You don't even know, none of them. None of the sons of, none of Ephraim, none of Manasseh. They are not Yehudites. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but as we go along, you'll realize that. But they are going to be the rich nobility of the children of Israel. Someone from the tribe of Judah will be king. So when Joseph dies, the tribe of Ephraim will be the preeminent tribe of the nation. But will accede to Judah in rulership. So Judah will always be the ruling tribe. I am at the top of page 3. So Ephraim will be the predominant tribe. Now, why am I telling you this? Because you need to understand, let's say you're reading the prophetical books in the Old Testament, the major prophets and minor prophets. Whenever you hear that prophet use the term Ephraim, He's not meaning Ephraim, way back in Genesis. He's talking about he is addressing the northern kingdom of Israel. He is addressing the whole of the northern kingdom with the title of the preeminent tribe. So often it will be called, sometimes it will be called Israel, sometimes it will be called Ephraim, sometimes it's Ephraim and Manasseh, but those are terms that are used to refer to the northern kingdom of Israel. So, in the instance of the birth of the twin sons of Judah by Tamar, and I'm in note 13, details are given of the birth. And this birth was of great significance because Judah's other sons could not inherit the prophetic promise that the future royal family of the nation of Israel would come from the descendants of Judah. They couldn't. Why? It's really kind of simple. They're dead. So they could not fulfill that promise. Yeah. Remember the saying, it's not rocket science. They could not inherit because they were dead. Now, the family of the nation of Israel then, the royal family, would come from the descendants of Judah. Now, so that means if you know that the royal family is coming from Judah, then is it important which one of Judah's sons is going to be determined to be the firstborn? Absolutely. So there was dissension regarding the rightful firstborn of the sons of Judah by Tamar, because the question of which of them was really born first, and therefore the heir, was a matter of great importance. Why? Because the right to rule is going to go to the one that's determined to be the firstborn. So in the record in the Bible, the birth of the twins, the hand of Zara appeared first, and the midwife tied a scarlet thread or cord. And scarlet is what color? Red. Okay. And that was to say, whenever they were born, she would say, well, this one came out first because his hand came out first. So then the Bible record says that the hand was withdrawn, and obviously Pharez did something. He made a breach. Somehow he got ahead of Zara somehow. Get out of my way, I'm coming out now. Again, that's not unusual because what happened with Jacob and Esau? That's exactly what was happening in the womb between Jacob and Esau. And Jacob put his hand out to protect himself from Esau's heel hitting his head. So he came out. So Pharez, the birth of Pharez took place. Okay? Pharez. This became, by the way, the seed of family discord. I mean, very serious family discord. Because there were people who would have said, well, really, it should, I can see people arguing about it today. Well, really, it should go to the person that was out first in any way. It should be the one with the red cord because his hand, he was out first. A part of him was out first. And then there would be the group of people, and the family would say, no, 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 no. It should be the one who came out fully first. And that was Pharez. So they began arguing about it. Which boy was the firstborn? Because that was very important. It wasn't just who was born first, but what? Who was going to be the heir? So Zara, with the scarlet cord around his wrist, and the statement of midwife, remember she made a statement too, this one came out first, or was it Pharez whose birth was completed first? Now, eventually, Pharez, or Perez, the same person, was declared the rightful heir, and from him descended the official governing branch of the tribe of Judah. Now, I'm going to ask you about, do you know any very important people descended from the tribe of Perez or Pharez? Okay, David was of the line of Judah from Pharez. So I don't have to tell you who else was descended from Judah from the line of Pharez. Jesus. Solomon, David's son by Bathsheba, was the last king in the United Kingdom of Israel. Now, when I say United Kingdom of Israel, I'm talking about one nation. No two kingdoms, one kingdom. So Solomon was the last king in the United Kingdom of Israel. Now, Zara and his descendants, and you can imagine, they considered that the decision regarding Pharez being the firstborn was a wrong decision that robbed them of their rightful inheritance. It was pretty, you can imagine they're pretty upset. They'll say, well, really, I was out first. And we don't know what happened. We don't know if it was some struggle in the womb. But they thought this is wrong. So from studying the tribal genealogies recorded in the Old Testament. So where are they? They're in the Bible. There are genealogies. Most people skip them. They're doing their devotional reading, and they look at the begets and they say, I'm skipping over those. Well, sometimes they're important. So from studying the tribal genealogies recorded in the Old Testament, we know that many, and here's the key. Are there questions so we can, okay, what's the question?
15. I missed the first one because I was looking at the
David, and then it's Solomon.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. So, because this note is very important, you all get. From studying the tribal genealogies recording in the Old Testament, we know that many of Zara's descendants left the main body of Israel during the time they were still in Egypt. So they're in Egypt, and Zara's descendants are now going to leave Egypt. They have that freedom to do that. It was long before the Exodus under Moses. And the Bible records the main lines of the descent from Pharez, Judah, for a very long period of time. Like I said, you can go into the New Testament, you're going to see the lines of the Pharez line. But the record of the descendants of Zara, Judah, ends with the third generation, which is why you have your chart. So you're going to have Judah, Zara, and then you're going to have Calcol and Gathalus. But it's, as you can see, it's third generation. That is it for the Bible, giving the genealogies of the tribe, the branch of Zara. Now, these genealogies were kept with great care, so any admission would indicate that those admitted were no longer in the land. So it ends in Exodus for the Zara line of Judah. So why? Did they die or drop off the face of the globe? No, they just weren't in Egypt anymore, where the records were being kept, and those records were the ones that they took with them in the wilderness and then into the promised land, and they kept taking them. So most, if not all, of Zara's descendants left the main body of Israel in Egypt before the Exodus from Egypt. So the question that must be answered then is what? Where did they go? Where did they go? Okay, now, I gotta put some things here, and I don't know where we go. symbols that was given to the tribe of Judah is the lion. And since Zara was a son of Judah, he and his descendants were entitled to the emblem, E-M-B-L-E-M, emblem of the lion. And that becomes so significant. To this day, in the nation of Israel, you will see two rampant lions facing each other, symbol of Jerusalem. You will see lions everywhere. So when Jacob, Israel, gave his dying blessing to his sons, he associated each of them with some animal, object, personal characteristic, which afterwards became the emblem of the tribe associated with him. And I thought I brought something in here, and I must not have done so. Or is it? Okay, it's here. You can look at this. This is the camping. This is how the tribes would have camped in the wilderness. Very interesting, with the tabernacle in the center. The encampment of the children of Israel made a cross in the wilderness. Types, shadows. But you can see the emblems that they had. And that afterwards then became the emblem of the tribe associated from him, that individual, that son. Among these, the lion, the emblem of Jacob's fourth son, is of special importance. I mean, special importance. And because it's going to help us gain some information regarding where Zara's descendants migrated. Now we know they left Egypt. We know they went to Spain. And they, by the way, left footprints. Zaragoza is one of them. There are some others that they left. Maybe you've ever heard of the story of Hercules. It becomes very important as we trace the tribes. So, the first symbol of the lion in a couchant, and I will pass these around to in-class people. I will just try to do this because I don't want you to see that one yet. And that was the very first symbol of the tribe of Judah. It was a lion in a couchant position, basically, lion. And this picture, of course, shows a couchant lion, lion's actually lying with a lamb. But that was the only picture I could get of a couchant lion. Okay. Lying down position, so it's lying down. And that became the emblem of the tribe of Judah. That was the first emblem for the tribe of Judah. Then you had a possum lion, which is a lion walking with one forepaw raised. One forepaw raised. So it's like he's walking with one paw raised, three feet on the ground, and the forepaw raised. I knit. You can see some symbolism in these. You will see them. Okay. Later, with the addition, then you had the rampant lion, which is a lion with up on his back 2 feet with 2 paws raised, and then later with a crown, it became the emblem of the royal house. Okay, so this one came along and they used it for the tribe, all the tribe of Judah but then later with the crown, the rampant lion, so you see a lion rampant up on his back legs with a crown, and that is the symbol that became the emblem of the royal, R-O-Y-A-L, house and the throne of Judah. And then this same rampant lion standing on the hind legs with both forelegs elevated, both of them elevated. And that posture with the crown, it's kind of interesting because now you have two paws raised, and that's not insignificant. Two paws raised, it became the symbol of the two tribed house and kingdom of Judah. Because the kingdom of Judah, when the kingdom split into the northern kingdom of Israel and the southern kingdom of Israel, remember we talked about that. At the death of Solomon, the united kingdom split. Remember we looked at where the 10 tribes went, where the 2 tribes plus a part of Levi went, the southern kingdom. Now, the 2 tribes are Judah and Benjamin. Judah and Benjamin. And I'm missing, this is one of my pictures, I don't know where it went. Oh, I had it. What happened to it? Okay, let's see here. It's here. Okay. We're not done yet. So yet the lion is not the only emblem of the descendants of Judah. Even though the descendants of Zara were bitter, and you can imagine it, they felt they were robbed of the birthright, and they were bitterly resentful towards the rest of the tribe of Judah. They still didn't give up the emblem of their identity. They said, we're not getting it. That's ours too. We're of the tribe of Judah. So even though they were angry, they didn't give up the symbol of their identity and descent. So they therefore kept the lion as their emblem. But they added their own variation to it to show that they were entirely separate and distinct from the Pharez line of Judah in Israel. So guess what they did? They kept the rampant lion, but their rampant lion was red. Red. And why do you think it was red? The scarlet cord. So in taking the lion as their emblem, making that rampant lion red, it was kind of a, we're Judah, and we really have the symbol, the red cord, showing we really should have had the birthright. And by the way, this picture of the rampant red lion happens to be the flag of Scotland. Does that remind you of anything that I said tonight about someone? Scota. Scota. The wife of Gathalus. But there's also another one, which we'll get to too. So they kept the lion. Thus the rampant red lion became an emblem of the Zara branch of the tribe of Judah. So the question that you all have to think about is this. If the rampant red lion was the symbol of the Zara branch of Judah, how in the world did it get on the flag of Scotland? We know where some of them went then. We know where some. And see, they may have forgotten much of their faith. They may have forgotten their history. They may have forgotten their language, but there were some things that were so ingrained in family that they remembered. Now, any questions about 18 before I move on to 19? Because that's probably the last I'm going to be able to do tonight.
What was the one right before red?
Red. There were two reds. Red. They depicted their lion as rampant and red, and the rampant red lion became an emblem of the Zara branch. Okay, in Genesis 38:28, because this gives us something else. 38:28. And so it was, speaking of Tamar giving birth, and so it was when she was giving birth that the one put out his hand, and the midwife took a scarlet thread and bound it on his hand, saying, this one came out first. Now, the Zara branch descendants also had another emblem that is entirely and absolutely unique to them. This emblem could apply to no one else, and is one to which the historical record draws special and emphatic attention. Hand, which would have been red in birth, right? The hand would have been red in birth, so it's a red hand, and she tied a red cord around that hand. So this emblem could only apply to no one else, and is one to which the historical record draws this special attention. It is a hand, red from the blood of birth, circled by a scarlet cord. So if we would see a red hand with a scarlet cord, that would be significant. So that red hand, or red hand circled by a scarlet thread or cord, became an emblem of the Zara branch of the tribe of Judah. And this was even kind of unique, because this even goes a little bit further. This is one of the flags of Ulster in Northern Ireland. What's unique about this flag? It's Northern Ireland. It has a red cross, a crown, a Star of David, and right smack dab in the middle is a red hand circled by a red cord. And notice what they're saying. Somewhere along the line, they said, we have the right to what? Rulership. We have the right to the crown. And basically, this is kind of an in-your-face symbol. It's the one with the red hand had the right to have the crown.
And that's from Scotland.
And this is the rampant red lion is Scotland. This one is the flag of Ulster, Northern Ireland. You can look anywhere online if you look for the flag of Ulster. The question was how you spell Ulster. U-L-S-T-E-R. And if you looked at some of if you watched the parade for Queen Elizabeth's Jubilee year, there were different flags that were obviously in the parade there. You would have seen this one. Okay. By the way, actually this is, I took this one. This is a better one. And I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll pass these around next week so that you can all take a look at them. This is just a better one of that same one. You can see it's very clear. The red hand, the red cord, and the crown. Okay. Okay, next week, any questions before we go tonight? Okay.
Number 9.
Okay, what number?
That's number 9.
Okay, number 9. Okay, number 9, if you're at home and missed it, here comes 9. Because of the promise to Judah in Genesis 49, the Pharez and Zara loins, I'm trying to hurry, must be reunited. Right? Because the promise was that the scepter would not depart from Judah. And we know that the scepter departed from Judah Pharez when Zedekiah went into captivity in Babylon. 17.
The beginning.
The first symbol of the lion is the lion in a couchant or lying down position.
Okay.
Okay, going back to 14 in the middle. Well, let me just read it. Okay, in the record of the Bible, the birth of the twins, the hand of Zara appeared first, and the midwife tied a scarlet thread or cord around his waist, saying this came out first. Then the Bible record says that the hand was withdrawn at the birth of Pharez, P-H-A-R-E-Z or P-E-R-E-Z, it's the same person, took place. This became the seed of family discord. Which boy was the firstborn and therefore the heir? Zara with the scarlet cord around his waist, and the statement of the midwife that this one came out first, or Pharez, whose birth was completed first. Is that it? Okay. Anyone else have a question? Yeah, Alicia.
Number 7, I just want to know about your comment. You said that the Zara line was shepherds. Did you say it was
Oh, yes.
shepherd kings?
Yes, they were shepherd kings, and they are called in Egyptian history Hyksos. H-Y-K-S. I think it's S-S-O-S. Yeah, it is. H-Y-K-S-S-O-S, and which means shepherd kings. And so you can do research on the Hyksos, and you can say, oh, okay, because they obviously, in all that time after when Joseph and they came down, they were given, by the way, Goshen was the most fertile area of Egypt. So obviously they indeed prospered while they were there.
So these shepherds, do they have anything to do with Levitical shepherds?
More than, well, obviously because it would come into that whole thing. And you can see, do you know that today in Egypt, Egyptians hate shepherds?
Really?
How many know about that? Internal hatred from generation to generation to generation. They hate shepherds. It's kind of, and and by the way, they don't even know where it comes from. It's just been ingrained over generation after, but it goes all the way back to there when it was resented. They resented the wealth of the Hyksos. Okay, any other questions before we? Yes, Joy. Okay, first part of number 7. The division of the Pharisaites and Zarahites occurred at the death of Joseph. Got it? Okay. Okay, we will pick up next week with more migrations. Now, next week we will cover the pre-Exodus migrations. Now, I've kind of given you the overview that there were pre-Exodus migrations. We are going to cover those migrations next week. Okay? If you are watching, please let me know that you were in class tonight. If you have questions, I would love to hear them, and I will answer those questions. If you have comments about the teaching, if you have a prayer request, we would love to hear from you. If you would like to give in response to the lessons that you are receiving, you can do so either online, on our website, or you can do it the old-fashioned way and send it in to the church address. Or if you're local, you can drop it off in the drop box in the lobby of the church. But we'd love to hear from you. And I would like to hear from those people that I know are watching, because I see the numbers and I'm still not hearing from you. So I would love to hear from you. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the week, and know that there is an eternal, awesome destiny awaiting God's people.